It is 9:37 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time. It is the 11th day of the month of July 2025, and this is episode 1132 of Bitcoin And. Today, we are faced with doing something very, very different for various reasons, because I just don't want to pile on to the noise that is out there about Bitcoin breaking yet another all-time high and then breaking it again and then making a new one. We're all very aware. There's honestly nothing going on right now. Other than that, there is literally nothing going on. It's kind of amazing, but I'm not going to leave you in the lurch, because this gives me an opportunity to fully introduce the Cathedral Project. And it is not a software, it's not an Oster client, it's not an AI thing. It is literally what I was telling you about yesterday. It's a concept that's been in my mind and will not leave me alone. It's like a nagging child. Daddy, Dad, are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? It won't leave me alone. And this has happened to me a couple of times before, and it seems very, very effective to actually get these ideas out either on paper or in a Word document kind of format. And this one is no different. In this one, if I'm referring to the Forest Walker project that I did, some of you guys heard Guy Swan read it on his podcast. I've read it on my podcast. I've done a full podcast about it without the reading on it. And I want to do the same thing here, except that I'm going to enter into a new kind of context for the next 2 weeks. 2 weeks, like Butterfly Labs. And if you know, you know. I won't explain it. I'm going on vacation. I will be in Southwest Colorado starting on Monday. Well, actually, no, I'll end up in frickin' Utah on Monday, because it's that far of a drive from Eastern Washington. And I will not actually be where I want to be, the promised land, which is Southwest Colorado, until the day after that. But for these next 2 weeks, I want to dive deep into the Cathedral Project. I want to really outline what it is. I want to also be able to get feedback from you guys. Because here's the thing. I'm not an agriculturalist. I'm not an animal husbandry guy. I've read a shit ton of books, from everything from ecology to soil to grazing and pasture management to holistic management with Alan Savory, and that thing's a frickin' tome. I've read the entire permaculture design manual. That thing is a frickin' tome. What I'm going on here is like 65 books. And every time I've read one of these books, it seems to have just put itself into a memory center in my head. And like a soup or a brew, it's just what pops out is this entire thing that I've decided to call Cathedral. So that's what the context is going to be for the next 2 weeks. Now, if something breaking or something, sets of news that really does occur in Bitcoin actually happen and is in some way, shape, form, or fashion rather newsworthy, then I will cut episodes while I'm in Colorado on those, because I will have my recording studio with me. I will have a laptop. I got internet access. I can do this show anywhere in the world. So that's what I'm going to do. So that's the context. Now, before we begin, I still am going to be doing the Circle P. And today's Circle P vendor is Leathermint. You can find some of the best wallets, belts, watch bands, and I'm thinking soon to be book covers, because I'll get into that here in a second, from Leathermint at theleathermint.com. That's theleathermint.com. You can get, by the way, a 10% off of all of your purchases if you use the code BitcoinAnd, because this is the Circle P. We are open for business, and my vendors that are in the Circle P take Bitcoin for their goods and services. If you're not selling your goods and services for Bitcoin, you are not in the Circle P. It's a rule. We all got to have rules, and Leathermint follows the rule. Actually, he doesn't follow the rules. He's always taken Bitcoin for his goods and services. And dude, his goods, oh my God, his wallets are freaking gorgeous. Highest quality leather. And I picked Leathermint for today's show because part of the Cathedral system is grazing animals, and we start with cattle, and cattle produces high quality food for humans, but they also produce high quality hide, which can be turned into high quality leather, which can then be cut and sewn into things like belts and watch bands and book covers, and in this case, wallets. One of my favorite wallets that he has, just by looking at it, is the Max, M-A-X. It's named after Max Kaiser. Max Kaiser has this tendency to wear lots of white and lots of orange. So this wallet is white and orange. Its cover and inside is white, and all of its accent marks like the edging and things like that, they're all in Bitcoin orange. It's a really gorgeous wallet. And you know what happens with this wallet when you lay it down on something dark? You don't lose it. Like my iPhone, I lose it all the time. Why? Because it's pitch black. For some reason or another, all my furniture is black or dark or whatever, and I can't find my wallet because it's dark. I can't find my phone because it's dark. You're not going to lose this wallet. And when you get this wallet, it's going to be with you forever. In fact, your kids will probably fight over it when you're dead. The stitching is done by hand. It's high quality stitching. And that's what makes the difference between a cheap, crappy wallet and a high quality, everlasting wallet like you'll find at theleathermint.com. Go to theleathermint.com, check out all of his wallets, but at least take a look at the Max. This thing is an awesome looking wallet. I got to tell you, man, it's pretty cool. But he's got things like some of these things are the inside. If you got credit cards, they're protected by RFID or not RFID. Well, they are actually. I'm sorry, RFID shielding, right? So these wallets are more than meets the eye. He's produced a couple of wallets in the past that actually has an NFC thing going on, so you can just tap your wallet on something that's NFC charged and pay in Bitcoin. The guy's got it down, man. Go to theleathermint.com. That is theleathermint.com. Find the wallet. The last wallet that you will ever own. And use Bitcoin and for a 10% off discount. That way, he also knows that I made the sale for him, and he will catch me on the backside with some sats. Now, let's get into the meat and potatoes of today's show. This is the introduction of Cathedral. It's not the full sketch. It's not the full plan. It's not everything. All right, this is going to happen over the next few weeks. So we're going to begin with the introduction. What is Cathedral? Well, it's a model. It's more like a blueprint, right? And it's challenging the way that we think about land and animals and trees and time. Bitcoiners are always all about time preference. We've had to completely refit the way that we think about things. We've had multiple discussions about things like fiat architecture, fiat fashion, fiat food. And we've all come to the conclusion, not all of us, but most of the Bitcoiners I know at this point, we don't think in what happens to me next week. We think about what happens to the third generation away from after my death. That we're really starting to embrace this idea, and God knows we need it. I can't handle one more strip mall. I literally cannot handle a one more shirt made in Malaysia, probably by, I don't know, child slave labor, that falls apart at the first time that it gets snagged on a tree or something like that. I'm just done. And this type of thinking has permeated everything. When I said fiat food, I'm not just talking about Taco Bell and McDonald's. No. I was listening to a podcast from John Kempf, Kem, was it KEMFP, I think is PF. KAMPF. John Kempf. He's an Amish gentleman that has built a company called AEA, Advancing Eco Agriculture, and it's one of my favorite podcasts about this type of thing. He was talking about farmers in the Midwest that can't feed themselves. They were talking about the fact that he was talking to a dairy farmer that bought their milk from the store. And when he said, well, hey, actually, this may not have been John Kempf. In fact, I think this was Jeff Lawton on Jack Spirko's show. It doesn't matter because John Kempf has these same stories, right? Farmers that farm food cannot feed themselves because none of the shit that they do either is actual food or they're also in the fiat mindset. So again, we go back to the dairy farmer that buys their milk at the store. And when asked about that, they thought it was an odd question to be asking. Why wouldn't you buy your milk at a store? And of course, the Jeff Lawton on the other side is like, because you're a dairy farmer, you're the one that makes the milk. That's how far down the rabbit hole fiat has taken us, where we don't even understand the concept that we produce milk. We could be able to go get that milk fresh from the cow and refrigerate it if we want and use it and drink it, make butter from it. We could do all kinds of stuff, but we could at least scrape the cream off for our coffee and then drink the whole milk. But this concept fell flat when Jeff Lawton was talking to this particular dairy farmer. Same thing with a wheat farmer. How much wheat do you think you can eat? You're going to need some kind of animal protein. Jeff had another story. It's like, it was the same dairy farmer. Like, literally, why don't you take some of the bulls that are born? Because even though you're a dairy operation, it's a cow-calf operation. You got calves coming out every year. Some of them are likely to be male. Why don't you take them and castrate them and grow them up and then have them butchered? And the answer was because we buy our meat at Costco. And they're the farmer. We've really been shattered as a species by the concept of fiat, by governments never having our best interest in mind and permeating their influence through scientific fields and agricultural fields and university systems simply because if you don't fall in line, you don't get the fiat money that we can simply print out of thin air. It's destroyed everything, even the concept of what a farm is. I at this point, I no longer look at a commodity farmer as a farmer. I don't know what I would call them. I'm not mad at them. I'm just saying that a field of rye is not a farm. It's something else. I mean, hell, the dairy farmer, at least we can say, hey, there's milk, there's animal protein there, there's animal fat there. Wheat, barley, God forbid, the swaths of yellow canola or rapeseed that I see in the fields around eastern Washington make me kind of sick to my stomach. I mean, I know that's how they make their money, and I'm not gonna say, hey, don't do that. That's not my business. That's their farm. That's the way that they get paid. But something is very, very wrong. And I came across a long time ago the concept of what's called a silvopasture. Silvo means trees or forest. You could say that. Pasture means pasture. So the word itself describes what we're talking about. A pasture inside of a forest, or rather, forests integrated into pasture. It doesn't matter because both systems are present. And I've always talked about edge effect. When you have a system that is a forest, smack up against the system that is like a pasture, and you get to that edge where the pasture meets the forest, and you get a whole bunch of species that are not present in either one of the systems. It's the most productive part of both of the systems. And there's only one more system on the face of this planet that is more productive than what you would call a savanna, which is the natural form of a silvopasture. It means that there's trees and grassland, and, well, actually, let's just call it pasture land, right? Pasture and trees. The pasture is huge. It's dotted with trees. And in like the Midwest, it used to be what was called an oak savanna. So the predominant tree was oak, and then it was basically a savanna or a huge pasture. And around those oak trees, man, dude, it's the most productive system in terms of the production of pounds of biomass, the amount of animals it can feed. There's only one more system on the face of this planet that can actually produce more, and that's a mangrove swamp. And I'm not living in Vietnam, so I'm not going to worry about mangrove swamp. I'm going to worry about silvopasture. So think trees and pasture. So let's do the definition of the cathedral. It is 1,000 acres. It is a regenerative silvopasture system. Now, it's a model, it's a template, it's not a prescription, because what would work for USDA Zone 6, and if you don't know what USDA zones are, it basically sets how much moisture you get in a particular place, what the frost temperatures are going to be, the lowest temperature, the highest temperature, the average temperatures, the amount of moisture, all that is defined in these USDA zones. And what's good for USDA Zone 6 is not necessarily going to fit in USDA Zone 3. In fact, if you tried to build a system for USDA 6 and put it into USDA Zone 3, it would be a complete failure. It will be a complete failure. And the same thing is probably true if you went up. So like if you were living in the panhandle of Texas, which is a good, definition line between USDA zones 6 and 7, but you built it for that and then took it down to USDA zone 11, which is closer to the equator, probably not going to work. So when I mean this is all the stuff that I'm going to talk about is a blueprint. I'm going to talk about black walnut trees. May not work where you live. And you may go, oh my God, I can't believe it. You may live in a place where if you planted a black walnut tree, it would fall over dead within a week. Then we've got to think about what other tree. But in a system that is this big, I can't do a prescription for every single USDA zone in every single region and every single whatever. It's impossible. But the framework here is what is important. How do these things work together? So it's flexible. And I think that this is one of the reasons why I do get excited about it, is that if the black walnut tree is the main nut producer in the system, is not applicable for your land, what about pecan? What about hazelnut? Yeah, how can this system be flexible enough to change where it is? Like, for instance, the model is on flat land. How much flat land is actually out there? Not a whole lot. Well, even what you think is flat has some kind of natural contour to it. But if you've ever been to the Palouse region of Washington State, if I were to try to apply the model that I'm bringing you here, everything would have to change. Not just the species probably wouldn't have to change, because I'm USDA Zone 6 here. I was USDA Zone 6 in the panhandle of Texas. And if that don't blow your mind, I don't know what will. But the way that it's physically laid out, it would not work here. You'd have to respect the contour, which I wouldn't have to do on a blown out hayfield in eastern Colorado or eastern Colorado or the panhandle of West Texas. But I would have to respect the contour if I was getting close to the hill country in Austin. So this is a model. It is to be flexible. So why cathedral? Why name it cathedral? Because of time preference. And one other thing, but time preference is really, really to the fore here. Cathedrals of Europe took centuries to build, would have hundreds of artisans and architects and stonemasons and haulers and laborers all working together over 200 years to build something like, I don't know, the great castles of Europe or Notre Dame or whatever. I mean, these things weren't thrown up in 6 months like your next big box store. There was a respect there. But I've also named it Cathedral because when I look at this in my mind, it's like a gigantic 1,000-acre prayer. I wouldn't count myself as being religious, but I have been known to go to church when I find a church that doesn't kind of get under my skin. I haven't been going lately because the church here for the Episcopal Church, I haven't really found one that washes with me. But for 4 years straight, I went to a church in Lubbock. It was great, right? But this is a prayer to God. I do believe in God. I will say that. Now, I don't stand out on the street corner saying Jesus is coming home and you're all going to hell. That's not me, and it's never going to be me. I did not find Jesus on the floor of a bathroom stall when I was hammered out of my mind. That's not where this shit comes from. But this is a prayer. It makes sense for me to think of this system as a church because of what it does. So what's the goal? More fertility, more life every year. To do that, I think I need to lay down some rules for the system. Now, while I read a whole bunch of science fiction novels and agricultural novels, I have this tendency to think of, I have this tendency to look at things like Forest Walker, the robot that goes through the woods and basically eats all the dead wood so that the forest doesn't burn down. And what I'm presenting to you here in Cathedral, I think of it as almost ag fiction, not sci-fi, but ag-fi. And I don't think that exists, but I think I'm here. I think we're both here. Agricultural fiction. And this may end up being nothing but a fiction. And that's okay. If somebody got something out of it and was able to apply it to their little piece of paradise, then good. I'm totally fine with that. But in my reading, I ran across the robot novels from Isaac Asimov. And if you've read those novels, you know where I'm going with this. It's the 3 laws of robotics. I've just reapplied them because it makes sense here. So for Cathedral and the Cathedral Project, the rules are simple. Now, the outcomes end up being complex, but the rules are simple. The first law is that the land must become more fertile and abundant every single year. The second law, every square inch of ground must not only maximize productivity, but increase its productivity unless, for some reason, that breaks law number 1. The third law, no synthetic chemistry can be used ever unless needed to obey the first 2 laws. I don't like chemistry. I like biochemistry. I think there's a lot of answers in biochemistry, fungus, critters, bacteria of all different shapes and sizes. That's actual soil fertility. Dumping nitrogen on the land causes compaction. And I never realized that before. I thought it was just tractors driving over the land that causes extreme compaction, which is not good. No, that helps. That doesn't help compaction. Well, it helps to compact, but it's the amount of synthetic nitrogen that you dump on the land that causes plants to essentially shut down its associations with the soil critters and doesn't feed them because it doesn't need to. It's got all the nitrogen that it wants. And because those little critters are shut down, the biochemistries that they release into the soil that causes soil aggregation that allows water to infiltrate and air to infiltrate shuts down. And there's only one path forward: the eventual compaction of all the land that's being treated with synthetic fertilizers. That's why this shit isn't allowed. However, hey, if we were to start this out on a blown out hayfield, you're probably going to have some kind of chemical inputs to kickstart the system. But the goal is biology only. So let's talk about the design logic because this isn't a farm and it's not a ranch, but it is a system, right? So let's talk about the tree lanes. Actually, I'm sorry. I jumped ahead. I want to talk about the perimeter. So 1,000 acres, think of a square, 1.5 miles on a side. So 1.5 miles east to west, 1.5 miles north to south. A complete, beautiful square. And here's where anybody who's an agriculturist starts laughing, and which is why this is merely a model. How many perfect squares of land are you actually going to be able to find? You actually will be able to find a lot, but there's a whole bunch of land out there that's just waiting to have this model planted on it, and it ain't a square. So we have to be able to be flexible in this model. So but for the model, it's because it's the best way to explain it. Think of a square of land, 1,000 acres, 1.5 miles on each side. Okay, that defines our primary sacred geometry, the square. At the very edge, place a dirt road. Don't have to pave it, don't have to gravel it, but you need access to every point by vehicles all the way around. So essentially, you don't place a road, you don't prepare a road, you just designate where the road's going to be. And that's where you put tractors or combines, or where you run cattle if you have to move them, from one side of the system to the other without going through the whole system, because it's a maze. We'll get to that. This is where you do that. That compaction, which will eventually occur, is actually okay with me, right? So the first thing we have is a square that's a dirt road all the way around. It'll just become a dirt road simply by treating it as a road. Think of it this way. If you have a really high quality $1,500 Japanese knife, do you know how to turn that into a cheap ass utility knife really quick? Use it as a utility knife. Use it to open boxes. Use it to cut shoelaces to length. Use it to cut leather. You'll take your $1,500 Japanese chef knife down to a utility knife real quick. Same with the road. I don't have to prep it. All I have to do is utilize it for what it's meant to be. So I've defined the very first part of this. The extreme edges of this square is for transit and is to be used as such. Now, we get into the first part of the meat and potatoes of this. The line of black locust trees intermixed with honey locust trees. These are support trees for the main tree coming, which is the black walnut tree. So envision in yourself a line that is the road, and then a line that is black locust and honey locust trees, and then a line that is black walnut trees. Right? So the black walnut tree is there for a couple of things. It is the majority of the carbohydrate drop for this system. It is the meat of the black walnut is slightly sweeter. It's got a deeper, more complex flavor than the English walnut, but they're drought tolerant. Okay. Let's just say they're mildly drought tolerant. They will die if they don't get water. I mean, that's a thing. But they're pretty much disease resistant. In fact, English walnut trees are grafted onto black walnut tree rootstock because of the fact that it just doesn't get that much diseases. It's disease resistant. And black walnut meat is actually kind of, it's a different flavor. It's good. It's good meat. But there's something else about the black walnut tree that comes into play here. We'll probably get to that later, but that's the nut tree. Now, again, black walnut tree doesn't thrive in your area. What about pecan trees? What about a different cultivar of black walnuts? What about a different cultivar of pecan trees? What about American chestnut trees that have been hybridized with Chinese chestnut trees? That's a thing. There's a good chestnut meat market going on. Is this to be the end all be all of the production? Oh, hell no. This is part of the production, right? This is part of the production. There are many, many revenue streams that we're going to go through here. Nuts, just part of it. But that's for different episodes. So right now we have a kind of a structure. Oh, well, okay. On the other side, so we got road, we've got support trees, or also known as nurse trees for the black walnut trees, and that would be the black locust and the honey locust. Then we got the black locust. On the other side of the black locust is another row of black locust, or on the other side of the black walnut trees is another line of black locust and honey locust trees. Honey locust trees are to be thornless. Otherwise, you will be walking around Jesus's crown of thorns everywhere you go, and we don't want that shit, right? And yes, black locusts do have thorns. We'll get to all that. But then on the other side of the black locust and honey locust nurse tree is a hedgerow, which is multi-species. We'll get into why that hedgerow is there on the inside of this here in probably a moment, and if not a moment, in definitely another podcast, because really this is all supposed to be an introduction, and I don't want to get too damn deep into the weeds. see what I did there? But we do need to go through some more stuff, because now that we've got a framework for the outside of the sacred geometry, if you want to call it that. We've got road, we got the support trees, we got a primary tree lane, and then we've got more support trees on the other side, and then we have the hedgerow. Right on the other side of that hedgerow is another designated road. Again, the same way that we think about it. We're not going to gravel it. We're not going to really prepare it. We're just going to utilize it for what it is to be. And that is a way to get around the entire interior of Cathedral, right? We have to be able to have access everywhere. These roads, by the way, are about 25 foot wide, so they should be able to accommodate quite a bit of machinery, right? They won't take a 30-foot combine unless you tow the combine header behind the actual tractor. And if you do that, yeah, it'll work. You'll be fine. You just have to set up inside. Why would there be a combine involved? We'll get to it, I promise. But now let's look and try to visualize the inside of Cathedral. Now we've entered the church, ladies and gentlemen, and what do we find but tree lanes? 23 tree lanes, about 7,406 foot long each. Now, between the tree lanes, the tree lanes pretty much are kind of exactly like the outer rim, except there's hedgerows on both sides. So, think of you've come inside the church, and the first thing that you see is a pasture. It's 150 foot wide. That's from the edge of the sacred geometry of the square to the first tree lane that you see. I've got the model set to where all tree lanes run north to south, all of them, so that they get just as much sunlight on the east side as they do on the west side of each individual tree lane. And again, there's 23 tree lanes inside this 1,000-acre plot, and they're 7,400 foot long. They almost go to the opposite end. They begin right at the edge, but they end just short of the other side. So if we're looking at the tree lane, the first tree lane, let's say it goes from, it starts on the south side, so it's connected to the edge and nothing can get through it. If you go and walk 7,400 feet down, it stops just short of the north side of the edge. And there's a reason, there's a very good reason for that, which again, we will get to. The 150 foot that's in between each, like from from the outer edge to the first north-south tree lane is there for pasture grazing. It also could be used for what's known as alley cropping. You could put, instead of grazing animals in there, you could, if you so chose, grow a crop of wheat or barley or rye or, God forbid, rapeseed. I hope nobody does that, but hey, it happens and we have nothing to do about it, right? In my mind, the pasture, the 150-foot span between each of the lanes, is for cattle. And that's where the rotational grazing is going to come in. And it's also where the rest of the structure starts to unfurl itself for you as we move through this. But for now, just think of a box that's contained on all sides, except there's like there will always be a couple of some entry points into the system, because access is key. If you don't design in access, everything is for naught. But for now, just think of all those trees in the hedgerow and the nurse trees that are all on the outer edge as a fence, a living fence that is animal type. No, this isn't going to happen overnight. This is why this is a 1,000-year plan. That's part of how we kickstart this thing up, but that's another episode. I'm just thinking of the mature system if you were to accidentally stumble across it after it's been live and going hard for 350 years. That's where we're at right now. I probably should have said that up front. But somebody's got to start this. Somebody's got to grow the trees. Somebody's got to do the hedgerows. Somebody's got to make the plan, right? But what we're after is, what does this look like at maturity so that we can wrap our little bitty, itty bitty minds around it? Because it's a big system, and my mind is having difficulty trying to interpret this whole thing myself, right? So 150 feet between tree rows means what? I designed it that way for a 30-foot header on a combine. You can take 5 passes down each of the lanes, and the tractor and the header will fit, and it will be exactly 5 swaths of if you decide to grow wheat or barley. Again, all I needed to do was say, hey, I only care about pasture. I only care about grazing animals. You want to farm it, you farm it. But to be flexible, I'm like, all I really have to do is figure out how many passes a tractor with a 30-foot header can do. And I just said, okay, 150 feet. It's like, okay, that works. That's 5 passes with a 30-foot combine. Okay. So now it's even more flexible for somebody who says, we don't have any cows this year. I don't have anybody to lease the pasture this year. What do? Lease it to a farmer? Maybe. And if we design it right, there should not be an issue. The farmer should be able to work the interior part of this like a farm field, like anything else. All we had to do was design it that way. So I want to talk about the interior. We've defined the very edges of the system. We've defined the first tree lane. It connects at the south and goes to the north, but doesn't quite connect to the opposite end. So if we start right inside the outer rim of the system and between that and the tree lane on the extreme south side, we define with fencing or whatever, electro fencing, however we want to do it, a containment paddock for a certain number of cattle, and they graze that. And then you move them the next day and they graze the next acre. And you move them north the next day and they graze it. And then you move them north to a new fresh acre in the next day and they graze that one, and on and on and on until you end at the end of the first tree lane. And then you hook a right to the east. And that's why the tree lane doesn't connect to the north side of the edge of this particular property, because you need the cattle to move into the next lane. So they move to the north, they move to the east, north of the end of the first tree lane and south of the north edge of the property. And when you move them far enough, You get to the center of that, and lo and behold, or you get to the center of the tree lane, the end of the tree lane, and you're looking square at what? The other tree lane, except this one connects from the north, goes 4,000 or rather 7,400 feet to the south, and doesn't quite connect to the south end. This gives you a maze structure all the way through the system. It's like interlocking fingers with passageways through the entire thing. But the cattle cannot get into the tree lanes because the hedgerows that border it are animal tight. And if we do it right, we would even be able to contain hogs and pigs. If we did it right. Now, hogs and pigs, different animal altogether. Cattle don't really like to be annoyed. A pig, that's a different animal, literally. We'll get to that. It's animal tight because I don't want the cattle walking around inside the nut tree lanes. I want them to stay in the pasture. There's nothing for them in the tree lanes anyway. And I don't want to build that much fucking fencing. The amount of fencing we're talking about would be, everything about this is already cost prohibitive when you start thinking about it. And this is why these elements have to come in stages. That's why this thing is at maturity at like 250 years. About the time it takes to build a full cathedral in old Europe. All right, so just keep it all in mind. But that's why the hedgerows. The hedgerows should also form a different function. They should produce medicine, food, fuel, fiber, whatever. We'll get to all that in later episodes. Right now, let's go back to the cattle. We've got a whole new 7,400 foot long, 150 foot wide pasture lane to graze these critters on. And now we start moving them from the north to the south. And we get to the south end of that second tree lane, we hook left. Right? So now we are able to get around the other side of the tree lane. And then we go to the north, we hang a right, we come down to the south. We hang a left, we go up to the north, we hang a right, we come down to the south. Rinse and repeat until you end up on the extreme. Let's say we started on the west-hand side. We end up on the extreme east end side. The travel time for those animals should be exactly 1 year. Maybe longer, maybe shorter. It depends. How much fertility is in the soil? How much forage is there? How many cows are you running? All these questions and more will be answered, I promise, at least in a theoretical standpoint. I know enough cattle ranchers I can start asking questions to. But the framework here is what's important. I know the framework works. It's the details that's going to make or break something like this. It's how the management of startup handles this that'll make or break this. It's how the ongoing management of a mature system works that will make or break the system going forward. These things are problems. I'm not going to lie. These are hard, extremely hard issues to work through. But if I don't put this thing out, like the kid that's going, Daddy, 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 are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Then I'm going to end up in a straitjacket, like I told you yesterday. And I do not want to end up in a straitjacket, so all this comes out. So if you already know that there's problems, then boost me and tell me about it. Or get a hold of me on Nostr. My Nostr profile, you can get to my Nostr account anywhere from any of the show notes. It's in there. All you got to do is click on it. It'll take you right. And you can read me the riot act and I will be fine with it because I will definitely learn something and I will definitely be able to integrate it into this system. But I'm not done for today just yet. Right? So now we've got you've got the maze logic. You've got the fact that the hedgerows are there for animal containment, so they've got to be animal tight. You've got the fact that there's, the black walnut trees are there for nut production, and then there's black locust as well as honey locust there to support the black walnut trees. How? The black locust is a nitrogen fixation tree. It's a legume. The honey locust is there. It has associative nitrogen fixation, but it's not a true legume. However, its presence has demonstrated that it, in conjunction with soil critters, where we think is it also fixes nitrogen. If I'm fixing nitrogen right at the edge in the drip line of the black walnut tree, what am I doing? I'm fertilizing the black walnut tree. And I'm not applying synthetic fertilizer. That's why the black locust and the honey locust is there. The honey locust comes into play later on. We'll get to it as usual, I promise. But you have a sense of the layout. If you were to look at it from the top, and I'll try to provide it. I've got a couple of schematics that I will start providing when I do these write-ups. I promise. I swear. I'm not going to leave you in the lurch. If you're having difficulty visualizing this in your mind from my description, I'm not going to blame you. That's why it's on me to make some of these things that I've been working on, these drawings that I've been working on for a while. I'll make them available so that you can just see it. All right. I promise it's not going to happen today, but I promise it will definitely happen. Now, I want to introduce a concept of measurement. And I've said this on Noster, and if you see me on Noster, and I've even said it on X, but I don't get any traction on X because I refuse to pay freaking Elon his $80 a year or whatever, or a month, or whatever it is that he wants. But I'm not going to buy engagement. I get natural, organic engagement on Noster. And if you're not on Noster, why? Anyway, let's talk about this. I've introduced the concept of, well, let's start with some of the other units that we all know and love, like the light year. Some people, it's like, oh, it's a measure of speed. No, it's not. Speed is a component, but it's a definition. It's more of a definition. A light year is a measure of distance. It's the speed of light and how far it goes after the speed, given the speed of light that a particle goes after it's been traveling at the speed of light for 1 year. We have acre feet. That's not a measure of area. Acre is a measure of area. You know, it's like 43,600 square feet or something like that. But an acre foot is actually a measurement of volume. It's 1 acre multiplied by depth. Like, and we use this for water, right? So like 100 acre feet means that you've got 1 foot of water on top of 100 acres. That tells you how much volume you have. There's many things like that. There's cow day, there's person hour, there's many of them. But I've never heard of the following measurement: an acre-year. What the hell is an acre-year, and why is it right for Cathedral? Well, how much I think of acre-year as a way to measure solar productivity and biological momentum. Now, there's no unit for it, not really, right? This is just a concept. Like everything else about Cathedral, it's a model. It's designed to be flexible. But I've never heard of acre-year. What can we do on 1 acre over the period of 1 year? Whether it's to destroy fertility, build fertility, or it doesn't even have to be that. Maybe somebody's thinking of, what is the square foot revenue I can get from an acre of land if I build a mall on it? That kind of thing, right? So, but in this context, I look at acre-year as the amount of solar production in the form of photosynthesis products, also known as photosynthates, and biological momentum. How much biology in the soil am I growing? How much biology above the soil am I growing? I mean, when I look at an acre, I see a completely different thing than just a dead patch of land in West Texas. I see nothing but potential. And it's all driven by solar energy. Every ounce of energy you see on the planet that is non-nuclear its creation was caused by our sun. Every drop of oil, every drop of coal, every cubic foot of natural gas, it's all come from the sun. Not the carbon, the energy that binds those carbon molecules together. That's where the energy is stored in oil. That's where the energy is stored in coal, in wood, in whatever. It's all carbon, and it's all been fused together by photosynthesis. That's where all our energy comes from. So now when I look at an acre and I see an acre over the span of 1 year, my question to me is, what measures production? How can we make it more productive? How far can it go in solar production, general production, biological momentum? The answer is, I don't know. Cathedral's there to find out. I guarantee you that one. But that is a metric that I want to introduce here, and I'm going to try to refine that and its usage as we move forward through the concept that is Cathedral. Let's see. I've got it. I'm working from an outline. So where are we at here? I think here's the way that I see this moving forward. We're going to be taking way deeper dives on the trees. Now, I'm going to stick with black walnut. I'm not going to say, oh, and by the way, let's have the next 30-minute discussion that we just had with black walnut, but we'll change it to pecan trees. I'm not going to do that. That's not useful. This is a model, right? It's a deployable, flexible model, and it will be in the mind of whoever, even in size. It doesn't have to be 1,000 acres. It doesn't have to be a section of land. It doesn't have to be 640 acres. I do think that there is a minimum viable size for this, but I also believe that there's a maximum viable size for this. I think minimum viable size for this model starts at 640 acres, which is a section of land 1 mile long by 1 mile wide. This model is on 1,000 acres. It's 1.5 miles long, 1.5 miles wide. I think the terminal size for a system of this would be 1 hectare, which I believe is not 1 hectare, like 1,000 hectares, which 1 hectare is sort of like the European equivalent of an acre, except it's like, I think it's 2.17 acres. So if we were to do this in hectares, Cathedral, it would actually end up being something like 3 miles wide by 3 miles long. I honestly think that that's a terminal size for management of a particular set of people. And we'll get into management way later. But I want to take deeper dives on the trees. How the support trees act not only as nitrogen fixation, shade providing during youth of the black walnut trees, because you don't want them baking out in the sun. You actually want them kind of partially shaded. And black locust and black walnut, or black locust and honey locust, grow faster, but they don't grow as tall. So at one point or another, the black walnut will outpace those support trees. But while those support trees are there, they're going to be providing all kinds of things: nitrogen fixation, shade, temperature control. They also serve as high quality fodder for animals. They also have a tendency, especially the black locust trees, to provide high quality lumber. And we're talking craft lumber. We're talking like the kind of lumber that is really beautiful when you sand it and stain it, and it's rot resistant. You know, like the United States, they say, was built on black locust. Why? Fence posts. This wood is rot resistant naturally. It has a natural fungicide in it that protects it from white rot and any of the other stuff that's going on in the soil. It has been cataloged that some black locust posts have lasted in the ground for 100 years. It's wood. It's not concrete. It ain't steel. It's not titanium. It's not made out of freaking kryptonite. No. It's just wood, except it has a fungicide as part of its natural component inside of its wood. And fungus don't like that. It doesn't exude it into the soil. It's not destructive to the fungus that's in the soil, but the fungus goes, I think I'm going to walk around this guy. I don't really want to die right now. There are multiple uses of everything in the system. I can pollard, or at about 6 to 8 feet tall on a black locust, I can pollard the canopy off of it. And it will not die. In fact, it will grow back. And in fact, black locusts kind of like that shit. But the fodder, the leaves, 35, anywhere between 20 and 35% protein. You know what likes protein? Cattle. Yes, there are studies that suggest you don't feed black locust to cattle. No, you don't feed the pods, the black locust pods to cattle. That comes from the honey locust. And again, we'll get into it. But the leaves are fine. In fact, if you wanted to, you could dry them out and use them as hay. I think that the best way to do things like this is to pollard the tree at about 6 to 8 feet up and just put the chopped off limbs into basically kind of like what you would put a bale of hay into, and just let the animals just eat the leaves off of it. But then you're going to take the wood and do something else with it. And we will get to that because that ends up being part of the heart of the system, which we're not even going to talk about today. That's how big this thing is. That's why it's driving me crazy. That's why I'd end up in a straitjacket. But you see how this is starting to work. The pasture could serve not only as graze, but as farmland. The trees support each other, but also have a dual function. Some of them have 3 and 4 functions in this particular system, if managed the way that I see it being managed. It's not a system for the faint of heart. It is a system for people who are freaking tired of the fiat world that we find ourselves implanted into and either want to get away from it or want to change it. This system will do both. It will change the way people think about agriculture. It'll change the way people think about farming. It'll change the way people think about ranching and grazing and forestry. And how many different ways can you construct revenue streams off of 1,000 acres? Generally speaking, a farmer like out here, like in eastern Washington on the Palouse, a farmer will lease 1,000 acres. They will grow 1,000 acres of wheat on that 1,000 acres. And then most of the wheat around here grows beautifully, by the way. I mean, it's like, even if you hate carbohydrates and want nothing but animal protein, if you're like me and like that, I can't just stop looking at the hills when they have the amount of wheat that is stacked on them. It's absolutely freaking amazing. But they're going to cut that wheat down and they're going to silo it, and that's it. They make one revenue stream with a given set of inputs off of 1,000 acres, and they don't make anything else from it for the rest of the year. In fact, for the majority of the year, all they're doing is spending money on this 1,000 acres. They make money one time. They have a single revenue stream, and that revenue stream happens in the 4-week window of harvest. And that's if you get to harvest it. Bad things have happened in the past. Wouldn't it be nice if you had 2 things on that 1,000 acres and one of them got, I don't know, hit by hail, and the other one said, I like hail. Hail makes me stronger. At least you are able to realize half of the potential revenue and don't lose it all like Gabe Brown did 4 years in a row in North Dakota. When he first started farming, Gabe Brown lost his entire grain crop, not once, not twice, not 3 times, but 4 times consecutively. He didn't lose like two harvests and then had a good harvest and then lose 2 more. No, his first 4 years of farming was complete 100% loss. He learned his lesson. He has multiple revenue streams coming off of his land now. Joel Salatin is another farmer that I've read, that I respect, that I'm trying to figure out how do I take his management style and move it into Cathedral, because he has multiple revenue streams. He could lose all of his chickens and it would hurt, but he's got other revenue streams on that farm because he built those revenue streams into that farm. And that's what this is supposed to do. That's what Cathedral is. So go to bitcoinandshow.com. Sign up for the email. I've got a couple of tiers up there. You want it free? I'll give it to you for free. You want it for $5, for $5 a month? I have that tier. You want it for $5 a year? I think I have that tier. I had somebody sign up yesterday for $50 a year. You don't have to. If you want to support what it is that I'm doing, I would love it if you did that. But everybody's going to get the information. There may be something that I release only to the people that pay. I don't know. I kind of feel bad about that. So that's on the table, but I don't know. We'll have to see. Sketches, writing, the series of podcasts, all of that. Go to bitcoinandshow.com. All one word, Bitcoin and Show, because the podcast is a show, bitcoinandshow.com. Just sign up for the email. The only emails that I give are when I release a show. That you should get maximum of 2 in a single day. 95% of the time, you're going to get 1 email. I do not share your email. Why would I? It doesn't make any sense to take something that is as valuable as a contact list and sell it to somebody else who may have a better product or a better podcast or a better way of writing or somebody who's more interesting. I'm not going to sell your list. It's just not going to happen. Go to bitcoinandshow.com. Sign up for the email. You're going to get this show. You're going to get the show. If you're listening on fountain.app, you're going to get the show anyway. But there will be a link to the show. There will be a write-up about what we talked about today. And there will be some other stuff. This is where I will put sketches out. This is where I will put visual materials to help you see what it is that I see in my head. But the only way that I can make sure that you get it is if you actually sign up for the email, because there's otherwise I'd have to be could you give me mine on Telegram? Oh, could you give me mine on Signal? No, dude, that's way too much work. Just sign up, bitcoinandshow.com. That's bitcoinandshow.com, and I will see you on the other side. This has been Bitcoin and I'm your host, David Bennett. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and hope to see you again real soon. Have a great day.